Iowa basketball has added its biggest recruit of the Fran McCaffrey era right after a 3-game losing streak and questions about his future. What's happening with Iowa hoops today? Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, hit the subscribe button. Just takes a moment and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Well, here we are on the day of Iowa, back on the hardwood again. They get Penn State coming in. We'll talk about that game here momentarily, and one of the more important games, certainly, that Iowa's had in a while, and they need to get off the schneid. We'll talk about that here in a moment. We got wrestling happening in Carver-Hawkeye coming up this weekend. We'll get into that a little bit as well. Plus, Tom Kaker from HawkeyeReport.com is going to stop in. We'll talk some Iowa basketball with Tom, along with a little bit of football and Yose Epanessa. That's all still to come. But the story of the day is Joshua Lewis, a 4-star prospect, has committed to Iowa. And a lot of times people hear 4-star, like there's different ranges of 4-star. It depends on the recruiting service. If you're a 24/7 person, if you're part of On3, if you're at Rivals, wherever you are, they all do it a little bit differently. And just to say that it's not all equal. A 4-star prospect on one site might be a 3-star somewhere else. So that's something you have to evaluate. But when we're talking about actual numbers, and this is what it is, this is a top 40 kid. Iowa hasn't had this high of a prospect in the recruiting world in basketball. You got to go back to Tyler Smith. Remember Tyler Smith at the end of the Alford regime, just how good he was, hit the ground running, a really talented guy that finished up his career back home in Tennessee. That's how long ago it was since Iowa's got a player of this ilk. Now, also looking at Joshua Lewis, and I'll be honest, when it opened up his recruitment, he decided he's a Florida kid. He was committed to South Florida. USF, that's kind of an odd one, not a whole lot of history. Remember, they were really good last year, and their coach, Amir Abdul-Rahim, was one of the top prospects in the country. In fact, when I was putting together my list of next Iowa coaches, I always kind of have that in my back pocket. You always hear about athletic directors. Well, I do it too because I'm weird. Anyway, he was one of those guys. Incredibly impressive what he did at a place that doesn't have a whole lot of basketball success. He passed away tragically. Underwent surgery, looked to be pretty routine. It wasn't. And so he decommitted. Really tough, obviously, for him. He went through the process, and then you look at his final group of teams. You look at the teams that were on his list here. It's just, one of these things doesn't belong. NC State, Final Four team a year ago. NIL, absolutely for basketball. Auburn, Bruce Pearl, made a recent Final Four. Marquette, a lot of basketball success. Michigan State, obviously we know. And there's Iowa. 4-star kid, top 40 player nationally. It's not going to go Iowa's way. And it goes Iowa's way. And then we see him in the video feed. So you got to check it out. Him squawking. It was fun. It really was a good time. Put a smile on the face. And it's just so wild because I was throwing dirt on Fran's grave. This thing was over. And it still very well could be. Like, you're not going to, if you believe a change needs to be made, if you're Beth Getz, you get to the end of the season and you believe for the betterment of your program, for your athletic department, that you have to make a change as the head coach of the men's basketball program, you do it regardless of who is committed to your program, regardless of who's in your program and is likely going to leave. Look, if Fran McCaffrey is fired after this season, the likelihood that all of these guys are going to be a part of it is incredibly low. We see this all the time. The turnover in college basketball is immense when there's a coaching change. And there's a really good chance that the guys that you enjoy watching play, Owen Freeman, Brock Harding, Josh Dix, all those guys would depart if there is a coaching change. And the likelihood that goes along with it is also you're going to see a guy like Joshua Lewis also leave the program. Still, to get this commitment, I think it changes things a little bit. Number 37 in the rankings over at Rivals. This is a guy that is incredibly athletic. That's what you continue to hear watching the tape on him. He's got explosiveness to him, and he's a different type of athlete than what we've seen recently and throughout most of the Fran McCaffrey era. And that's what also makes this something different. We've talked a lot about the differences that we've seen for Iowa basketball as it pertains to Fran McCaffrey. His sideline demeanor just looks so different. I've called it checked out. That's what it appears on the surface, but that's kind of what you have. It is a guy that he just looks so different, and you're kind of left scratching your head. But then you go through and you look at what they've added, and you look at this class, the class of 2025. Dike, the big kid that's at a prep school, who's already signed, 6'2", 200 pounds, a developmental guy, you'll hear that, but a lot of upside that they really like. Desmond Briscoe from Indianapolis, 6'8", athleticism, good rebounder. This is what we hear out of him. Now Joshua Lewis, maybe the best athlete out of the bunch, a guy that can go get it, has got skills offensively, and a top 100 player. And here's another component that maybe I overlooked it, and credit somebody on the YouTube channel on the comment section. They mentioned this, and it's fair. This is still relatively a young team. Yes, you have a senior in Payton Sanford. You got Thelwell coming in. Also remember, he's making the transformation from the Ohio Valley Conference to the Big Ten. It's a pretty big jump. Dix is a junior, has played a lot of basketball, but you still look at a big part of this core. Owen Freeman, just a sophomore. Brock Harding, just a sophomore. Zaydu Traore going through it for the first time and just a sophomore. This is a really young group. Ajay Dembali, just a sophomore. This is an incredibly young group overall, along with the freshmen and Cooper Koch. We haven't been able to see much of him this year. Pryce Sanford, there's another one. Also, you guessed it, a sophomore. This is a young group. And because of that, maybe expectations got a little too high. Maybe I had the expectations that weren't likely with this squad. And one final thing. I go back to the last time we saw a really down year with Fran McCaffrey's team. That was back in the 2017-18 season. That year, Iowa had a little bit of buzz before the year, had a bunch of young pieces. It was a sophomore, Tyler Cook, a sophomore, and Isaiah Moss, a sophomore in Jordan Bohannon, a freshman in Luka Garza. Cordell Pemsel was a part of that team. You had Jack Nungy part of it, but all these guys were incredibly young. And it went awry. It was really bad. And they went through a downturn I don't think any of us expected. They went in an exempt tournament. They lost to Louisiana Lafayette and South Dakota State. They got drilled by Iowa State. Got beat up by Indiana. And it was a down year. But what did they do? Those guys became upperclassmen. They got a whole lot better the following season. And that was the year that Iowa was a shot away from beating Tennessee and getting to the Sweet 16. Had a great comeback victory against Cincinnati in the NCAA tournament and had the Vols. Took them to overtime, a number 2 seed in overtime. That's how close that they were. Does Fran McCaffrey deserve a mulligan on this season? It's a question I think we're all going to be talking about, and one we're maybe going to have to answer. Let's get into a little bit more conversation. We'll go behind the scenes. Tom Kaker runs the recruiting and runs the shop over at On3, HawkeyeReport.com. He will join us. We'll get the latest on his thoughts on the addition of Joshua Lewis. We'll talk about that. Plus a little football talk with Tom Kaker as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, the connection with other fans are unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing the Bears would clinch a playoff win live. It was a long time ago, but it's a memory I'll never forget. This year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. I use Game Time Picks to grab tickets for a game at Carver-Hawkeye Arena, and it couldn't have been easier. I found a super deal that gave me great value for amazing seats, and I could even preview the view from my spot before I bought it. The all-in pricing, my favorite, a game changer. No more surprise fees at checkout. Plus, knowing my tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, make sure you use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Locked On College, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Right now, Tom Kaker from Hawkeye Report. He'll be at Carver-Hawkeye Arena tonight watching the Hawks and Penn State, 8 o'clock tip-off. That's FS1, I want to say. Correct, Trent? I think it is, FS1. If you can't watch it on TV, you can hear it at least locally here and throughout most of the state once the sun goes down on News Radio 1040. WHO. Hello.
And FS1.
It is FS1? Yes. That's what I thought. Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm good, and I will be one of those hardy souls that will be in attendance tonight.
That's good.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Absolutely, as am I. I want to see how this team bounces back. You know, Tom, Trent and I, and we haven't been alone speculating that the McCaffrey era is coming to an end, and we've been, both out there willing to, go on record, etc. Not that we're Fran haters. I don't think either one of us would check that box. I won't speak for Trent. I know I'm not. We just think it's coming to an end. That's all. But yet we see this recruiting class that keeps getting better and better and better, which leads me to believe, you know what, I might be dead wrong. Just when we thought we had something figured out, not so fast. I mean, this is another good get, a 4-star wing in Joshua Lewis that's added to a pretty good overall top 25 class, Tom.
The Michael Corleone line was just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the Godfather 3, I believe. But yeah, they're recruiting really well. I mean, they got the kid from Minneapolis who's coming in, who is very highly thought of. Out of high school until Miami, and he's with the team now. Will not play obviously the rest of the year, but. And then Joshua Lewis, who's, I think, probably the highest rated recruit that they've got in the Fran era.
Wow.
So locked him up, got him. Now he has not signed yet. They won't be able to sign until the second signing period. But I don't even know that they really even sign anything. I don't know what they're signing these days. The letter of intent seems to be gone away. I don't know.
Cash the NIL check, and that's good enough.
Yeah, I guess. But anyway, he's sold on Iowa, and now they've got 4 recruits. Now I think the first 2 guys, Briscoe and Diakite, they're more developmental.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're bigger guys,
yep.
And they've got some promise. But I wouldn't expect either of those guys to come in and kind of make an immediate impact, especially Diakite, because he's pretty skinny.
6'10",
to add some weight, but yeah, they're doing well with roster development and trying to put something together. But it's a results-driven business, guys. It always has been and always will be. So they've got to win some basketball games starting with tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And they got to rip off a few because it's going to get more and more difficult as the back half of the schedule gets there. So what's gone wrong here as you look back and all encompassing the last couple of weeks, short of the Indiana game, and it's a struggle to get by an average Nebraska team at home. You get blown out in both your LA trips. You get beat by a bad Minnesota team. What will you point to most? What's gone wrong and why this squad just looks all out of sorts all over the place?
I think it's a multitude of things. The rebounding was something that I was concerned about coming into the year, and that has proven to be one of the bigger problems for this team. Is they have not rebounded the basketball very well at all. And Fran's teams, other than the 4-year stay of Adam Woodbury, have not defended very well.
Mm-hmm.
And unless that offense is cooking and unless that offense is making a lot of 3-point field goals, Iowa has struggled and lost some games badly. I mean, those are just the facts of the matter. And I hate using injuries as an excuse, but Payton Sanford's beat up. Josh Dix was limping around the other night. He's obviously not 100%. Owen Freeman's wearing braces on his ankles. So I know his ankles are not 100%, but nobody is this time of year in college basketball. So it's just part of the game, but it seems like it's hit all of their kind of key guys that they're just not healthy.
Tom, you were there, so I'm anxious to get your take on this. On Tuesday night, the Minnesota game, The attendance was bad. Obviously, the results not what anyone. I'll give them the fact that they got back into this at the end because it looked like it was going to be a blowout, and maybe we would have heard the boo birds because I don't know at the end. But what was it like? Did it feel like it was over at any point? I mean, the whole era. Did it feel like, wow, this is kind of the beginning of the end? Did it feel like that at all for the Minnesota game?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I always push back on the attendance thing a little bit because that's been kind of the attendance. It's been all year. The students just haven't shown up except for probably the Iowa State game.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how you fix that, but they've got to fix that. And I didn't expect a lot of people. It was
cold,
wind chill warnings, 8 o'clock. It was a Tuesday where there were high school games going on at the same time. But it has not reached Licklider levels of attendance, which were worse than this. They just were. But they've got to figure out a way to re-engage with this fan base because you can't give your tickets away right now to anybody. But you know what I did? I was my seat in press row. Just the section over is where Beth Getz sits on press row. And so I just always kind of kept glancing at her to see what her body language was like. And she was just very stone-faced. She does not show any emotion one way or the other, or disgust, or like thumping her hand on the counter or anything. She just very stoic, just watching the game and then exiting the building.
It's a difficult spot, but I keep getting the financial part of it. We know the TV revenue is really good. I brought up when Iowa State needed to make a choice. It was a $10 million decision to fire Steve Prohm, pay the buyout to get Otts from UNLV. That was $10 million to make it happen. And Iowa State was able to. Yet people are concerned about the ongoing litigation in college athletics, the COVID money that still needs to be paid back from the athletic department to the university. Where is Iowa, the athletic department as a whole, financially right now?
Well, and then you've also got to throw in the fact that they're going to have to take $20.5 million out of their expected budget and put that towards paying their football, basketball, and other athletes along the way. So that's another part of this equation where things are tight. Here's the other thing that they are seriously thinking about. I know this for reality. They've got a project for Carver-Hawkeye Arena that they want to upgrade that place and put some suites up on the top. And that's no secret. It's out there. They're trying to fundraise for it. It's about $65 million, I believe. And it's hard to fundraise right now with all the different ways where money is going. And there are still some people out there who just want to do facilities things. They're not into paying players and stuff. So they're looking for lead gifts and that sort of thing. It's hard when, as much as women's basketball is a big deal in Iowa City. It was bigger when 22 was playing basketball. It's not as big of a go-to. I mean, there's still people going to all those games, but it's coming back to the ground a little bit. Men's basketball still has to be your number one thing, and they've got to, people just don't want to give to that program right now. They just don't. I mean, you've seen it with the NIL stuff and everything. And that's the hurdle that they've got to climb right now and just kind of look at is how is this going to what's the cost benefit of doing what you might have to do?
Yeah. Can you afford not to? I mean, there's a lot of questions on the table. Fascinating. Back to the game Tuesday. A couple of guys, Tom. Drew Thelwell, is he hurt a little bit because his offensive production last couple of nights certainly hasn't been where we thought it was going. And then Traore, I thought it was his best game as a Hawk. So Thelwell and Traore from Tuesday, if you would.
I think you're absolutely right with Sadhu. I thought he looked comfortable for the first time since before he rolled that ankle. I think that was like the South Carolina Upstate game. Was when he kind of had a little bit of an injury there and with that ankle, but he looked good. I just don't think either guard played very well, and they spent a lot of time sitting next to Fran as a result. They thought Brock struggled at times. I thought Drew struggled at times. I think they're going up against bigger guards, and they're just getting kind of beat up by that. Now, tonight, you won't have that because, Penn State's got at least one guard who's small. Ace Baldwin, who's one of the best guards in the conference, but he's only 6'1", so it's not like there's a massive difference there. So I think we'll see more of them, but they've been going up against like that USC team. I mean, their smallest guy was like 6'5". It was just like, mouse in the house. We saw that with UCLA too, with the Daly kid just posting up Brock over and over again.
Got a football question for you. I know you have a good relationship with Epanessa and Yose. He's out there. He's played a couple All-Star games, the latest, the Polynesian one. He has shot up the recruiting rankings after those performances as well. I can't remember which side it was. I think he went up like 80 spots, which I just don't remember seeing this late in the game. Take us in a little bit. And is Yose a kid that's going to be able to come in and help that defensive line right away this year?
He's going to have a chance. Now they've got, he's coming in to play defensive end, and they've got probably 3 guys that are pretty solid. And then you've got Kenneth Merriweather, probably the next guy. But I think it's going to be a lot like when AJ came in, where it's just going to be hard to keep him off the floor or off the field rather. And he's just going to be out there, I think, at some point and making an impact. I just think kid's too good to sit, and he's going to be out there this year.
Ask you a week or two ago about anything in the portal for this semester that's done. You mentioned that at that time. When we look to the spring period, though, when the portal opens again, cornerback obviously specific. Do you expect them, though, to be overly active? Another position you think about, you got 2 nice running backs, but after what Caleb Johnson did, if there's a heavyweight out there that wants to come to Iowa, is that something that they'd be willing to look into? Just how active do you think they'll be when the spring portal opens?
I think part of it will depend on what they see this spring from the team. And if they see a glaring hole that like, hey, we got to go find somebody, I think corner is definitely on that list. There's no question they'd want to get some more depth there, and they tried and couldn't get anybody. But I think all the other positions, they kind of pretty happy with what they got and the haul that they got. But if there's a certain guy out there that pops in there, boy, you go for it and you try to get them. It's just it'll be a challenge though, because I think you're kind of budgeting your house money out at that point, and so it's you're probably. I guess these schools are signing deals according to Wisconsin. They're already signing deals subject to the House approval. In
really,
so who knows? That's what happened with the Lucas kid. That's how they signed that 2-year deal with him, and it was pending approval of the House settlement, which should come in April.
Apparently, Scott text Castro's also going to the Senior Bowl.
Is he?
Apparently,
okay.
so
Cool.
Yeah. Trent mentioned the schedule for men's basketball coming up here. So are the last 2? I mean, not winnable. They'll win some more games, but Penn State tonight at Ohio State, and then the water gets deeper with Purdue coming because they've got a long layoff. They're off for over a week once we get through Monday night, Tom.
Yeah, they've got a big stretch coming up, and as Trent and I have talked about, that back end, that last 8, woof, man, if they make a run in that last 8, they're back in the NCAA tournament talk, but. Boy, it's going to be a heck of a way to get a run at Illinois, at Northwestern. You got Oregon and Washington coming to Iowa City. And Michigan State's coming to Iowa City. I mean, they got that last 8. At Rutgers and at Maryland, too.
Hello.
I mean, that's just a murderer's row.
Tom Kakert, HawkeyeReport.com. Tom, great stuff. As always, speak with you in a week. Thank you, Tom Kakert.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Tom Kaker, Hawkeye Report.
Back with you one final time, Locked On Hawkeyes. I'm Trent Condon. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. 5-star reviews if you're over on the podcast. I'd really do appreciate it. Those analytics, however they all work, right? Put it together. Those clicks really, really do help us. Those great descriptions that you guys give, the comment section on YouTube, and the reviews that you give on the audio side on Apple and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, wrapping things up here. Time to talk a little wrestling. And to be honest, I usually try to talk a little bit more wrestling, but we've got to this point here as we're in end of January, and there hasn't been a ton. Yes, there's been some injuries. There's been a few things that we've touched on, but overall, now we're getting into the meat of things, right? We're getting into the part of the schedule that gets really fun. Penn State coming up next week. That'll be a monster. Has Iowa closed the gap with all these new additions this year? Are we going to see, the young guys go out there? What are we going to see from Gabe Arnold? What are we going to see from Ben Keeter? The new additions that have come in with Kyle Parko and what we've seen out of Teamer as he makes his way back from injury. There's a lot out there with this squad. Drake Ayala was the Big Ten Wrestler of the Week a week ago. Should be really fun to see a local guy, Fort Dodge kid, have an opportunity. We'll be keeping an eye on that. But it's Ohio State coming up this weekend. There is a betting line out there. In fact, over at Circus Sports, they have betting lines for college wrestling duels, and you can find that Iowa, at least the opener, had them as a 10-point favorite in the duel here. Should be a really good environment over there. Another top 10 matchup, but until we see them against Penn State, I want to see this team at arm distance, keep building, but really excited. And I believe the gap has closed. Look, when we get to March, Iowa's going to have to probably have almost everything go perfect, right? From Stephen Buchanan running the table to having Caliendo win a championship, Parka win a championship, Teamer win a championship. I mean, these are the kind of things you're going to have to do. Ayala be there in the finals, all these guys being there, and then that next tier of guy. If it's Ryder Block at 41, if he's going to be able to get to All-American status, can that happen? Same thing for Gabe Arnold. Same thing for Ben Keeter. All those things probably going to have to happen, and Penn State not wrestles to their ability, but there's an outside chance. Likely, I wouldn't say so, but let's keep building things. Wrestling, we'll get more and more into it going forward. A couple of spotlight matches to keep an eye on. I mentioned Drake Ayala at 133. He'll get a top 10 matchup against the Ohio State wrestler, as long as Nick Bozakis goes for them. A couple others. Teamer, him on his way back against Sammy Sasso. Those two have faced off one other time, and Teamer dominated. I'm believing it was his first collegiate match, if memory serves. 74 should also be a good one. Top 10 matchup there with Patrick Kennedy, the Hawks, going up against a 6th-ranked wrestler from Ohio State. And then a heavyweight. Ben Keeter gets another 5th-ranked Nick Feldman. So those are some of the matches to watch. That'll be 1 o'clock on Saturday on BTN. We will be back with you tonight after the conclusion of Iowa Penn State on the hardwood. Iowa basketball, a must-win situation. In fact, didn't talk about that a whole lot. This is must-win for this Iowa squad. They have to get this one. As we talked about with Tom Kaker, this schedule gets much more difficult, I believe, over these next 4 games. 3 of them are at home. You got to go at minimum 3 and 4. And you might have to run the table. Penn State is the easiest of these 4 games. After that, you go to Ohio State on Monday. Then you come back home after a week away against Purdue, followed up with the rematch against Wisconsin. That's before you go on the road for 4 of the next 6 road trips to Rutgers, Maryland, Illinois, Northwestern amongst them. Oregon comes to town in between along with Washington. The schedule is going to be a bear. Got to get some wins. Get some positivity. It was great getting the commitment of Joshua Lewis. Iowa, Fran McCaffrey getting a 4-star. Now let's get some wins. We'll talk to you tonight after the conclusion of Iowa Penn State. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. That's what we do for you each and every day, talking Iowa Hawkeyes sports, wrestling, basketball, men's and women's, football, and a whole lot more right here on the Locked On Network. And the Locked On Network has you covered with your favorite team every day. NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL, all covered there. Plus, we got our special shows like Locked On Big Ten, talking all things Big Ten, Locked On College Basketball, Locked On College Football, Locked On across the board. That's what we do. And thanks for being a part of Locked On Hawkeyes. We'll talk to you again tonight. Go Hawks.